I didn't realize this at the time because I didn't care yet about politics, but it was also a very jarring realization of the corruption that exists in politics, that these institutions are broken, and that they're broken not just because people haven't found a cure yet or because there needs to be more research or more awareness or more funding, but because there is evil. There's greed and there's profit motives and there's, a revolving door between big government and big pharma. And it's not just broken, it's immoral.
Welcome back to Gen Z Unplugged. Today we have a fun episode with Liz Wheeler, the host of The Liz Wheeler Show on Blaze TV. Liz is also a fearless advocate for faith, family, and freedom, as well as a best-selling author. We hope you enjoy.
Liz, thank you so much for joining Gen Z Unplugged today. I haven't been able to listen to any of the speeches today, but I finally was able to listen to your speech. You did a phenomenal job. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about yourself with the audience. Obviously, this is your first time on Gen Z Unplugged, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. Share a little bit about your story. What first sparked this fire inside of you to expose corruption of all forms in our government, past regimes, and really just this repeat of history that we're seeing today?
Yeah. So you want me to go way back? Like how I got into
Yes,
politics?
your family, because that's what impacts it all. And I love that you talk about that.
Yes. So it seems like a long time ago now, but it was never my intention to get into politics in the first place. When I was in high school, I was a competitive swimmer. And my plan was to get a scholarship to college, swim competitively, and, do what athletes do, which is usually like coach afterward. That's what I loved. That was my passion. And then shortly after I turned 16, you're about to embark on the whole recruiting process, very exciting. I was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune issue. In fact, I was misdiagnosed at first. They couldn't figure out what it was, and I became very ill very quickly. And the rug was pulled out from under me, I like to say, when it comes to swimming. All of a sudden, this thing that I loved, this thing that was my past and my present, I wanted it to be my future, was just gone. And so all of a sudden, at age 16, not only was I very ill, which is a weird experience in and of itself, the entire structure of my life, even, I am sad to say, part of my own identity, which should have been rooted entirely in Christ, but I was imperfect, was shattered. And I'm looking ahead to this sort of unknown reality of what my life is going to be, or what do I actually care about? Like, what gets me as excited? What do I feel passionate about? What do I want to work towards? And it was somewhat of a long journey to come to the next answer to that. And I will separate this into two separate points. The first point is that was actually my introduction to the MAHA movement. So I have had my foot in conservative politics, but also in what used to be a leftist, crunchy, alternative health, holistic movement for a long time, because very sadly in our culture, obviously we suffer from a chronic health crisis. Chronic disease is everywhere. But 20 years ago, when I first encountered it, it was not as common. So now you say, oh, I have an autoimmune disease, and probably half the people in the room would be like, oh yeah, me too, which one do you have? But back then, doctors didn't have any answers whatsoever. And, I faced a lot of gaslighting, a lot of like, are you sure that you're actually, like, this is actually real? Which is, horrifying as a teenager to be treated like that. But it also, thank goodness for my sainted mother, she refused to take no for an answer when doctors told us, there's really nothing that we can do, just, kind of make her comfortable or whatever. Do you want counseling? And she refused to take no for an answer, and she went on, an absolute research journey where she dived into any abnormal test result that we could possibly find. She would dive into it, and she eventually found research by a research doctor that, was working on things that were tangentially related to what I was suffering. And you can call it now alternative healthcare, right? It's not the pill in the orange bottle with the white cap. It was like a lot of diet and lifestyle and detox. And, we found genetic mutations that were causing a buildup of all kinds of heavy metals and toxins and bacteria in my cells. And not to get too much into that, but it really was an introduction to me that of two things. One, of what it means to be a mother, that you're not just giving life to your children when you are pregnant and giving birth, that, you know, my mom gave me life again by sacrificing so much of her time and her effort and her life into finding a cure for me when the medical community was just discounting me.
Yeah.
And that example is something, I mean, I will never forget to my dying day. But it was also an example, and I didn't realize this at the time because I didn't care yet about politics, but it was also a very jarring realization of the corruption that exists in politics, that these institutions are broken, and that they're broken not just because people haven't found a cure yet, or because there needs to be more research or more awareness or more funding, but because there is evil. There's greed, and there's profit motives, and there's, you know, a revolving door between big government and big pharma, and it's not just broken, it's immoral.
Yeah.
And so I sort of unintentionally and very much against my will at the time, I of course just wanted, like, give me a pill, make me better, get me back in the pool. That was not the reality that God had for me. And so I became more involved and very passionate about the Maha cause long before it was ever a conservative cause. Sometimes people now will be like, oh, how can you interact so well with leftists when you're so outspoken conservative? And I was like, well, half of my life was interacting with these people who were leftists at the time, like in another life.
Yeah.
So at the same time as this is happening, right, as I'm getting this beautiful example of sacrificial love for my mother and this understanding that, you know, the corruption in our country and these institutions is not a mistake. It's not just people being bad at their jobs or, you know, we haven't yet found a cure, that there's real evil that exists there. At the same time, I am, you know, praying to God on a nightly basis, please give me something to be passionate about. What am I supposed to do if I'm not going to swim?
Yeah.
And around that time, I mean, and when I say that time, this is over the course of a couple of years. Around that time, a man with a funny name decided to run for president in 2007 against Hillary Clinton. That man was Barack Obama, and I knew nothing about him because I was not involved in politics. But, you know, when you're sick in bed, you know, I had a laptop. It was this is probably foreign to Gen Z, but we didn't yet have like smartphones all the time. You wanted that kind of stuff, you were on your laptop. While I was sick, I spent a lot of time like reading what was going on. And I realized that this man who was challenging Hillary Clinton, who was a senator, but a new senator, when he was a state senator in Illinois, he had voted against protections for babies born alive after botched abortions. And, you know, I was raised Catholic. I am to this day pro-life. That's horrifying. No matter your level of awareness of what abortion is, that's just so gruesome. It's so evil to look at that living, breathing, warm baby that was already targeted for death and to say, we're not going to give you any help.
Yeah.
We're going to leave you to die. And I thought, well, my gosh, I don't want this man to be president. And so I just started getting a little bit more involved. You know, back then it was Facebook groups more than anything else, where Facebook groups back then were very different. It was more similar, I suppose, to like Instagram comments where people would argue in threads and stuff. And I started a couple of Facebook groups that were started getting a little bit more involved in the political conversations as I needed more information to, in the midst of these debates, to combat some of the left. I started reading books to learn. And before I knew it, I was reading like a book a day.
Wow.
Just consuming voraciously this enormous amount of content to educate myself, because I was like, oh, I want to know more than these people. I want to know what's right. I want to know how this works. I want to know how to fix this. And before I knew it, I was like, oh, whoa, God really answered that one, because he gave me this incredible passion at first for being a pro-life activist. And then I distinctly remember I wrote in my journal the day that Barack Obama was elected president. You know, this is obviously after he defeated Hillary in the primary. I remember writing, just devastated really, about what this was going to mean for our country. I remember writing a prayer and just asking God to give me the grace and the courage and the permission to dedicate my life to fighting against these evil forces that were targeting our families. And so that's where it started. From then, I kept reading, I kept getting involved, I wrote op-eds, I contributed to a book that I'd pulled together a group of young conservatives, and we self-published a book to give ourselves a platform to go into media stuff. And I, ended up going on a speaking tour. I served in local government in my hometown in Ohio as I think the youngest person in our city's history to hold that position. And eventually that led to working in the media, but it was all rooted in those couple of things that, we spoke right before we went live here about the greatest gift that our parents gave us is our Catholic faith. Or not your Catholic faith, your faith.
Yes, my faith.
Big announcement for your family. She's converting. You heard it here first. Kidding. In case there's like a grandmother listening. But the greatest gift that our parents gave us is our faith. And, I was very fortunate to be raised by parents who instilled in us the fact that, like, great career success is great, academic success is great, but really you need to be living with your eyes towards eternity. So you combine that with watching my mom, sacrificially love me and not take no for an answer as I was ill, and, how do I even phrase this? Encountering this corruption in the healthcare system and realizing what's behind it. And then, seeing that election and praying for passion, and it all kind of culminated in God being like, I'm going to place you here right now, and I've prepared you for it.
That's amazing. That's so inspiring. And I know that you are married and you have 2 beautiful daughters.
Yes, I do.
And a wonderful, just courageous career. And I just would love some of your advice for listeners and for us, how you were able to balance being such a present mother, present wife, as like your first priority, and also fulfilling your calling, what God has called you to do, to be in a place of truth for people to come to for the true story, and be so outspoken in your faith.
Yes. I am married to a wonderful man. Of course, I'm biased, but I think by anybody's standards, he's pretty wonderful. And we have 2 daughters, a 4.5-year-old and an 18-month-old. And it is always, I think Father Mike actually says that the balance of family life is never actually a balance, it's balancing. So it's a constant recalibration. But one of the things that my husband and I are very committed to with raising our girls is this idea that it is our duty as parents, our primary duty as parents, to shepherd these souls back to heaven. Everything else is either secondary or tertiary. And if you raise your children not just big picture, we want our children to go to heaven, but on a daily basis, on a minute by minute basis, understanding that every decision that you make is going to impact the formation of this child's conscience, this child's imagination, this child's ability to make decisions, their courage, their principle, their character, their faith, every single thing, from the books they read to the example that you set and how you interact with your spouse and with other people in your family, to the way that you speak, to the television that they either consume or don't consume, to the people that you allow them to interact with, to what type of care you allow to be outsourced to them. Every single thing impacts who these children are, even before they realize it. And we made a commitment that our primary duty as parents to shepherd these children's souls to eternity would always be the first thing considered when it came to my career. Because it's very easy in this business to work 100 hours a week. Your time is demanded at a very high level, because we live in a society that consumes media at a very high level, and there's always new crises that are happening. But the way that we not find balance, the way that we are balancing is looking at all decisions through what I spoke about to the young women today, which is we as women are incredibly influential. Of course we are. Every person is, men and women, but women are incredibly influential. But our presence is required for us to be influential. And again, this actually is not a commentary on men or whether their presence is also required to be influential. But the certain aspect of womanhood that is unique to being a woman, and that is motherhood, our responsibility as mothers is not just to, feed your child breakfast or change their diaper or buy them the newest toy or, shuttle them to their after-school activity. When you are viewing your responsibility as shepherding this soul to heaven, then you realize that that can't be outsourced. So my primary focus is being present to my children in those little moments, because it's those little moments that actually are formative of these children's souls. So when I balance a career and I balance motherhood, it's kind of a joke when I say that I do my career on the side, because in a sense it isn't. But my husband and I are very fortunate too that he's a medical provider and he owns his own company. So his hours, he can either work longer hours on different days, or he works second shift if I have to film in the morning. I mean, I of course, don't don't spend 100 hours a week working in the office. But we're very fortunate that when I am sitting here with you, he's with the children. So of course, like he is also committed to shepherding these souls to eternity. So the formation that they are experiencing being with their father is a wonderful gift to them. And as I said, I know not everyone is able to have when I call it flexible hours, we have designed our work-life balance or our careers around the timing of it. But we are with our children, either he or I or both of us, 100% of the time.
Yeah. That's amazing. No, I think it's really important, and I'm so glad you brought up, just even in your speech today, on the importance of parents. You were talking about Tyler Robinson taking the life of Charlie Kirk, truly an American hero, martyr for Christ. Horrific what happened, but I think even just looking at Tyler Robinson's parents, and there were so many people who were like, oh, I feel so bad for the parents, and I'm so glad you brought this up. You know, I'm 18. How old are you? You're 23. 23. Mm-hmm. We've both been raised in very amazing homes. You've been raised Catholic. You've been raised Catholic. I'm sure you were obviously raised in a really amazing, God-fearing home, structured around faith, family, freedom, and you understood what mattered most. And I'd say the same for both of us as well. And, my dad always told me, he's, in the scripture, throughout the Bible, it says to train up a child in the way of the Lord, and they will not depart from it. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I can try all of these things, but I don't really know. We don't know, right? Of course, there's free will. But the Bible says to train up a child in the way of the Lord, and they will not depart. Not maybe they won't depart, or maybe they'll get off on the wrong path and turn away completely from the Lord, but they'll come back. No, it says they will not depart. And of course, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to make wrong turns, and we learn our lessons. But to truly, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak as a parent, but just from my own experience, and I have 3 siblings, I'm the oldest of them, and you're the youngest? Yeah, youngest.
So you've had a lot of parents.
Yeah. But I think this is really important because parents do have to take personal responsibility. They do have to recognize that they have to prioritize their family. And this goes for even as someone who does this, I guess, for a living. I feel that it's just a passion. Same with you, and I'm assuming for you, it's just a passion. It's more than a career. But you still have to prioritize your family. Even if you're a young girl or a young man who isn't married, but you're doing all of these things, you still have to prioritize your immediate family. So I'm curious your message to parents, because there is a huge blurred line. People come up to me all the time. They say, I understand you're so passionate about the family unit and raising your kids up in the way of the Lord, and young, students really diving into the Word of God and staying close to Jesus. But it's not guaranteed. I don't know if my kid is going to depart, or my kid did depart, but I didn't do a bad job raising them. And then you start going through it, and it's like, well, were some things that went wrong in your parenting, whether you sent them off to a state-run college, but they didn't know why they believed in what they believed in, and then lost their moral compass. So I'm curious your thoughts. I know that's a lot. But
yeah. No, I think there's 2 ways to look at this. First of all, we as parents are all broken people because everyone has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So we as parents, it's an extremely humbling endeavor to be a parent. And I will say it like this. I have always, and I don't mean this to sound egotistical, I have always in my life been able to achieve and somewhat easily. I played a sport, I was pretty good at it. I did academics, I got good grades. I've always been able to achieve if I put my mind to it.
Yes.
And so there's an incredible sort of confidence or bravado that comes with that, being like, I can handle it, whatever, throw whatever at me, I'll figure it out. And when you become a parent, you realize, and this is the first time that I realized this, when you become a parent, you realize that you are wholly inadequate without God. That it's not just about what you can do or how smart you are or how physically capable you are, that you do not have what it takes on your own to bring these children back to Christ. That you, as a parent, and me as a mother, need to spend time on my knees begging God for the grace to protect my children from my own brokenness and my own sin, because it doesn't matter how good of a person you are, we are all sinners, and that sin has impact on other people, including our children. Probably the closest people that it impacts is our children. And so when we say, when, as you mentioned the Bible verse about raising children in the ways of the Lord, it doesn't matter how hard I try. I can do a pretty good job putting together a pretty bulletproof, explanation or case for something, but it doesn't matter when it comes to the constancy of raising your children in the ways of the Lord, I will make mistakes. I will not be able to do that perfectly, no matter how good I am at life, no matter how smart I am, no matter how much effort I put into that. I will not be able to perfectly show my children the love of Christ. I can imperfectly show them that love, and I can ask God for forgiveness when I fail, but there is no parent who is able to do that perfectly, because we are all broken as well. And so we require the grace of God to be good parents to begin with. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I wish it were an easier formula in a sense. The second thing is God gave us free will on purpose, so that we could choose to love him, so that our love had meaning and substance and it wasn't just animal instinct. And he understood that giving us free will meant that we could choose evil, as we see in front of us every day and have since the dawn of time. And that's true for children, even if they were raised in very good households, even if they were raised with conservative values, even if they were raised with surrounded by faith. Sometimes children, especially when they're adults, make the wrong choice. They choose evil, even if they've been given a background and a foundation. And again, that kind of exemplifies this humility of being a parent, that you can put as much effort, make as many sacrifices, do as good of a job as you possibly can. And not only are you not enough, even if you did a really good job, sometimes your children choose evil, because that's what human nature, that's what God allows with his permissive will as part of human nature. All that being said, and I understand the temptation of this as a parent of young children myself, it's very easy to fall prey to a couple of narratives. It's very easy, it's a very tiring thing to be a parent. It's constant. It's very easy to be like, wow, it would be easy for them to just be on their iPads for like an hour so that I could like get dinner cooked or something like that. It's very easy to say like, you know what, I'm just going to send them to preschool for, 3 hours a couple days a week because I got to get stuff done. Like I gotta have just a moment to myself so that I can be a good mom. Or, which is a very popular Instagram influencer message, like, oh, to be a good mom, you have to first take care of yourself. Like, actually, no, you're called to sacrifice yourself to be a good mom. But it's very easy not to realize the influence that various things in our culture have on your children. So go back to Tyler Robinson for a minute. Yes, his mother should have known better than to let him, at 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 years old, however old he was, prepubescent, I assume, to let him bury himself in the computer and have unrestricted access to the internet and become obsessed with video games. Like, that's obviously, by our standards, imprudent, right? That was not good discernment on her part. That was not wisdom. I have no idea what her background is or why she made that decision. But in order to do our best to shield our children from these evil influences, which specifically target them, we have to be thinking about that on a minute-to-minute basis, and we have to be willing to make the unpopular countercultural decision that your child might be the only child not allowed to see whatever movie is popular. Your child might not be the only one that isn't allowed to have a cell phone. Your child might be the only one who isn't at the local school because the school allows cell phones, and it doesn't matter how sound the curriculum is or how great the administrators are. If even one other kid is on TikTok, your child is being exposed to it. Same thing. You might be very unpopular to be like, well, I'm actually not going to send my kid to the daycare or the day camp, or I'm going to keep them with me, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to teach them this, that, or the next. I'm going to shield them from what the pride flags mean. I recently told my daughter, she noticed a flag, and I said, the rainbow is the symbol of God's promise, that he's not going to flood the earth again. Because I'm going to protect her from that scandal and that sin until she's old enough to not only discern right from wrong, but she's old enough to comprehend what it means when society sins and when there's evil. I'm not going to put that on her before she's ready for that. I know that this is a long form answer to your question, and part of it, and I don't mean to sound discouraging, but part of it is that there's no assurance no matter how well you raise your children, and that's why you need God as a parent, and you need, like I said, most humbling experience of my life, and I am ashamed to say I may not be very easily humbled, which may be why my most frequent confession is pride, but especially now that I have children, it's very humbling to realize that you are inadequate in this without God, but it's also incumbent on us to realize that those day-to-day decisions, sometimes even the smallest things, impact the formation of our children.
Oh, yeah. And I know we're almost out of time, but I'd love to hear what your advice would be for young Gen Z women who want to become mothers one day, who want to become wives. How can they prepare themselves to be the best version of themselves so that when they come to the huge responsibility of having children and raising them and being, the formators of them, how can they best prepare themselves, and how can they be the best version of themselves for their husband and for their children?
That's a great question, and I think your generation it's the first generation in a while that's asked that question, and that makes me very happy to see. I think your generation is going to do great things for this nation, our culture, and our politics. The first thing, of course, is to make sure that you're living with your eyes to eternity, and that anything that you are called to along the way is but a path in that journey. So you don't know, well you're engaged, so you, I guess, do know. Theoretically, young women don't always know when God is going to bring, their spouse into their life, when you're going to meet that man that you fall in love with, and he falls in love with you, and he proposes, and you get married. I mean, goodness, I think we all wished, probably from the time we were 12 on, to know exactly who this person was and when we were going to meet him and how it was going to happen. But you don't know that. And so you try to become the woman that God created you to be, so that whenever he does call you to a relationship and to marriage, that you are prepared. Now, this is it's spiritual formation, essentially, because then once you are a mother, you are spiritually well-rounded enough. Once you are a wife, you're spiritually well-rounded enough to serve in that role. The other thing, and this is a much more practical type of thing, is it's a lost art to pass down from generation to generation the practical parts of mothering. Like, how do you put a baby to sleep? How do you breastfeed? How do you do this, that, and the next? You probably don't know the answer to that unless you happen to have a sister who has a baby who's like FaceTiming you all the time, or it's not something that culturally is passed down. And so what I advise young women to do is, like, don't wait to follow the home birth accounts and the breastfeeding accounts and the crunchy mom alternative swap accounts until you have a baby and the thing is before you. Educate yourself now so that when you get to that point, you're like, oh wait, I know what resource to refer to if I need help with breastfeeding. I know what clean alternatives for that. I heard someone else talk about that issue, so that you're not reliant, because without that information, by the way, without that education, you are reliant on these institutions that don't share our worldview. And I'll give you an example. Pediatricians. If you don't know things about children's health, if you are not already educated about vaccines and about co-sleeping and about breastfeeding and about all of these different controversial topics, then the only resource that you're going to have in that moment when you're being asked what you want to do, or you're being given a directive, give this vaccine or don't sleep next to your baby, the only resource you're going to have is the expert, the quote-unquote expert, which is the pediatrician. And yet the pediatrician is trained in a specific model that is not always congruent with our worldview. It's certainly not congruent with science, but it's very difficult when you have a tiny squirming baby that's dependent on you for life, and you're being gaslit and told by someone else, you're going to kill your baby if you sleep that baby next to you. And if you don't give them this vaccine, not only are they going to die of measles, but the whole country's going to be infected and you're going to ruin herd immunity. You get these things said to you in the moment, and it's overwhelming, and you don't know what's right, and you don't have time to do 3 months of research before the decision needs to be made. And I pray that this generation dives into that stuff. You don't have to wait to read marriage books until you're about to be married. Like, read them now. Learn about relationships. Learn about human nature. Read about being a mother. Follow those accounts. Like, become familiar with it, so once you're there, you don't feel that you have this vacuum of knowledge to the point that you can't actually make a decision yourself, that you're reliant on someone else for that decision.
Yeah, that's right. So inspiring and such great advice. Thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today. It was amazing having you. So
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
How can people find you real quick?
Oh, yeah. You can go to x.com/Liz_Wheeler. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. Go to blazetv.com. We also have video on Spotify now. So if you're not already subscribed to the show, go to Spotify, search The Liz Wheeler Show. Subscribe while you're there. Give us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
for coming on.